I said yes and felt a wave of relief. 10 minutes later, I was sitting on the cold floor of a public restroom, realizing I hadn't agreed to love. I had agreed to conditions. I just didn't know yet what price I was being asked to pay. I was kneeling on the cold tile of a public restroom when my phone buzzed, the ring still fresh on my finger, and all I could think was that I had just said yes to the wrong future. The bathroom was inside a small art museum downtown, the kind with white walls and echoing footsteps, and I had ducked in there because my hands were shaking too hard to let anyone see. I remember staring at my reflection under the harsh lights, mascara slightly smudged, cheeks flushed, a woman who looked like she should be glowing, and feeling a slow spreading panic instead. 10 minutes earlier, I had been standing in the sculpture garden outside, the winter sun low and pale, the air smelling like wet stone and metal. Aaron had been smiling in that careful way he had when he was nervous, his shoulders tight, his voice steady but too measured. He took my hands, said my full name like it mattered, and dropped to one knee between two abstract steel forms. People stopped. Someone gasped. I heard a phone camera click. When he opened the box and I saw the ring, a simple band with a small diamond that caught the light, my chest filled with heat and relief, and something like gratitude. We had made it, I thought. After everything, we had made it. I said yes without thinking, the word leaping out of me, my voice breaking on the edge of a laugh. He slipped the ring on my finger, stood up, kissed my forehead, and for a few seconds the world narrowed to the two of us and the sound of my own heartbeat. Applause rippled around us. Someone shouted congratulations. I felt chosen, anchored, finally safe. Then he cleared his throat. It was such a small thing, that pause, but it shifted something inside me. He pulled back just enough to look at my face, his smile softening into something more serious. He squeezed my hands again like he was bracing himself, and said there was just one thing we should talk about now, before we got too carried away. His tone was calm, almost gentle, the same tone he used when explaining a budget or a schedule. I laughed, because that felt like the right response, and asked what he meant. I thought he was going to joke about dates or venues or how long we would stay engaged. I was still floating, still light. He said that after we got married, he expected me to quit my job. He didn't rush it. He didn't stumble over the words. He said them clearly, as if he had practiced, as if this was always part of the plan. He said he wanted us to start our marriage the right way, with clear roles and fewer risks. He said my work was too unstable, too unpredictable, and that once we were a family, he needed to know what to expect when he came home. I remember the exact way the sunlight hit his face when he said it, how it picked up the faint lines around his eyes, how normal he looked. People were still smiling at us, still lingering nearby, and I felt my own smile freeze in place, like it didn't belong to me anymore. I asked him what he meant by quit, because my brain needed time to catch up. He explained that he didn't mean immediately, maybe a few months after the wedding, once things were settled. He said he would take care of us financially, that his job was solid, that he didn't want me to worry anymore. He said it like he was offering me a gift. My job wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. I worked as a freelance event photographer, long hours, late nights, inconsistent paychecks, but it was the life I'd built with my own hands. It was how I paid my rent before I met him, how I kept myself afloat when things fell apart with my family years earlier. It was how I felt like myself. I told him that, my voice suddenly too loud, too sharp in the open air. He nodded, patient, like he was listening to a child explain something temporary. He said he understood that it mattered to me now, but that priorities change. He said marriage requires compromise, and that stability was more important than passion once real life begins. He said he wanted a wife who would be present, not always chasing the next gig, not coming home exhausted and distracted. The word wife landed heavy in my chest. I looked down at the ring, at how perfectly it fit, and felt something close to grief flicker through me. I asked him why he hadn't mentioned this before. We had talked about marriage, about kids someday, about buying a house. We had talked about my work, my schedule, my dreams. He had come to my shows, met my clients, bragged about my photos to his friends. This felt like it had come out of nowhere. He said he didn't want to ruin the moment, that this was the right time because it showed how serious he was. He said he assumed I would understand, that I would see it as a natural next step. He said he was proposing to a future together, not just to the way things were now. That was when I felt my throat close. I managed to nod, managed to say we should talk later, managed to smile for the strangers who wanted one more look at the ring. I kissed him again, quick and light, and then I told him I needed the bathroom. Inside the museum, the quiet felt oppressive. I walked past paintings I couldn't see, my ears ringing, my body moving on autopilot. In the restroom, I locked myself in a stall and pressed my forehead against the door, breathing through waves of dizziness. I wasn't crying yet. I was just trying to understand what had happened. Aaron and I had been together for 4 years. We met at a friend's birthday party in a crowded bar, both of us shouting over the music, both of us tired of pretending to be someone else. He was steady in a way that drew me in, thoughtful, reliable. After a childhood of chaos, his predictability felt like kindness. He showed up when he said he would. He called when he promised. He made plans and followed through. There were signs, if I'm honest. Little comments about my schedule, about how late I worked, about how it would be different when we had kids. Jokes about how he couldn't wait until I had a normal job. I brushed them off because everything else felt so good. Because he loved me, I told myself. Because relationships involve adjusting. Standing there in that bathroom, the hum of the lights overhead, I realized how carefully he had framed his condition. He hadn't said I couldn't work. He hadn't said I had to become someone else. He had said he expected it, as if it were a given, as if the decision had already been made. He had attached it to the proposal like fine print, something too small to refuse without seeming ungrateful. When I came back out, I washed my hands for longer than necessary, watching the water run over my skin, grounding myself in the sensation. I practiced my smile in the mirror until it looked convincing. Outside, Aaron was waiting, his arm ready to slide around my waist, his expression open and hopeful. On the drive home, he talked about telling our parents, about dates and guest lists, about how relieved he felt now that it was official. I listened, nodded, answered when I had to. Every few minutes my left hand caught the light, and each time it did, a sharp mix of joy and dread twisted inside me. That night, after the excitement faded and we were alone in his apartment, I finally asked him to explain again. I needed to hear it in a quieter space, without eyes on us, without the weight of the moment pressing down. He sat across from me at the kitchen table, his hands folded, the same calm expression on his face. He said he loved me. He said he wanted to build a life that was simple and secure. He said he had seen his parents struggle because his mother worked too much, because she was always exhausted, because there was no structure. He said he didn't want that for us. He said my work made him anxious, the unpredictability, the way it pulled me away on weekends and nights. He said he needed to know that when we were married, our home would be my priority. I asked him where I fit in that picture. He looked surprised by the question. He said I would fit in as his partner, as the person who supported him, who took care of the space we shared. He said I was so good at creating beauty, and that could be our home now instead of someone else's event. The room felt smaller with every word. I tried to explain that my work wasn't just something I did for money, that it was tied to my sense of self. I told him how scared I was of disappearing, of becoming dependent, of losing the part of me that felt alive. He listened, nodded, reached for my hand. He said I was overthinking it. He said he wasn't asking me to disappear, just to shift focus. He said marriage meant choosing us over me. He said, love requires sacrifice. The way he said sacrifice made my stomach drop. It wasn't a shared sacrifice he was talking about. It was mine. We went to bed without resolving anything. He fell asleep quickly, his breathing deep and even, his arm heavy across my waist. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment of the proposal, every conversation that had led us here. I wondered how many times I had ignored the discomfort in my chest, because it was easier than confronting it. Over the next few weeks, we told people we were engaged. There were hugs and champagne and questions about dates. Each congratulations felt like a small lie I was complicit in. The ring became heavier on my finger, not because of its weight, but because of what it represented. A future that was already being negotiated without me. Aaron started talking more openly about plans. About budgets that assumed one income. About moving to a quieter neighborhood. About me having more time finally. Each time he framed it as a benefit, as a relief he was offering. Each time I felt a little more cornered. I tried to imagine myself agreeing. I tried to picture quitting my job, turning down clients, watching my calendar empty out. I tried to tell myself that love was worth it, that security was worth it. But every version of that future ended with a tightness in my chest. A sense of being trapped in someone else's idea of a good life. One afternoon I was editing photos in a small cafe near the river, the kind of place with chipped mugs and slow afternoons. Sunlight streamed through the windows, dust motes floating in the air. I watched a woman at the next table laugh into her phone, her voice low and confident, and something inside me cracked open. I realized I was grieving a version of myself that Aaron had already decided to leave behind. That night, I told him I couldn't promise what he was asking for. I told him I loved him, but I needed my work, my independence. I told him that if we were going to get married, it had to be as equals, not as a project he was managing. His reaction was quiet, but it cut deeper than anger would have. He said he was disappointed. He said he thought I was more ready than this. He said he didn't want to force me, but that he needed to be honest about what he wanted in a wife. He said he didn't know if he could move forward without that assurance. The space between us felt suddenly vast. We were sitting on the same couch we had shared for years, but it felt like we were on opposite sides of a widening divide. I looked at him and saw how certain he was, how little room there was for me to be different. I asked him if he would ever consider compromising, if there was a version of our future where my work could still exist. He hesitated just for a second, and then shook his head. He said he had thought about it, and that this was what he needed to feel secure. That was the moment I understood. He wasn't proposing to me as I was. He was proposing to the idea of me he felt comfortable with. The ring wasn't a symbol of acceptance. It was a condition. I went home that night with the ring still on my finger. I sat on my bed, the city noise drifting in through the window, and turned it slowly, watching the light catch on the diamond. I thought about the woman I had been before I met him, about how hard I had worked to stand on my own. I thought about how easy it would be to say yes again, to choose the path laid out for me. The next morning, I took the ring off. I placed it back in its box, my hands steady, my chest aching. When I met Aaron later that day, in the same sculpture garden where he had proposed, the metal forms casting long shadows, I handed it back to him. I told him I couldn't accept a future that required me to shrink. I told him I believed in compromise, but not in conditions that erased me. He looked stunned, then hurt, then angry in a quiet way that made my skin prickle. He said I was throwing away something good. He said I would regret it. Maybe I will. I don't know. What I do know is that as I walked away from that garden, my finger bare, my heart heavy, there was also a strange sense of relief. Like I had stepped back into my own life just in time.